The warehouse in Malaga smelled of salt, dust, and forgetting. Dr. Eleanor Vance wasn't supposed to be there. Her permit was for the National Archives, not this privately owned industrial locker on the Spanish coast, a graveyard for documents the world had deemed irrelevant. She was chasing a ghost, a footnote in a 16th century priest's letter about the Sultan's mirror that showed not the face, but the fate. It was a professional obsession her colleagues at Boston University smiled at politely. Historical meteorology was a serious field. Chasing fairy tales about a weather-predicting artifact was not. But the footnote had led her here, to a crate labeled Fragmentos, Sitio Antiguo, 1588. As she pried it open, the Mediterranean sun, slicing through a high, grimy window, caught not on brittle parchment, but on a sheet of metal. It was about the size of a hardback book, astonishingly heavy and cold to the touch. One side was a mottled, weathered bronze. The other was a near-perfect, reflective silver, obscured by a strange, cloudy patina. As she lifted it, her own face swam into view, then seemed to dissolve. The metal grew icy in her hands, and in its surface, for a fleeting 3-second burst, she did not see the corrugated tin ceiling above her. She saw a sky of impossible, roiling violet, and a city of gleaming white towers being lashed by a storm of black rain. She dropped the mirror. It clanged on the concrete, unharmed. Eleanor Vance, Ph.D., a woman who built her life on peer-reviewed evidence, had just witnessed the impossible. The hook was set. The story had begun. This is the story of the Mirror of Ibrahim, an object born not of magic, but of a science so advanced its principles would not be named for centuries. Its creator was Ibrahim al-Mausili, a polymath astronomer and metallurgist in the court of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent in the glittering 16th century Istanbul. Ibrahim was not a sorcerer, he was an observer. He had noticed that certain alloys, when smelted under specific celestial alignments and polished with a slurry of magnetite and quartz, developed a peculiar property. They didn't just reflect light, they trapped it. And not just any light, the diffuse, ambient light of the sky itself. His breakthrough, detailed in ciphered journals Eleanor would later painstakingly decode, was that this trapped light decayed at a predictable, infinitesimally slow rate. By comparing the trapped sky glow within the mirror's metallic lattice to the current sky, one could measure the difference. This difference, Ibrahim theorized, was a record of atmospheric refraction, density, and particulate matter, a snapshot of past weather. His masterwork, a large disk of his secret alloy, was set in an observatory tower. By 1565, he had learned to read the subtle shifts in the mirror's stored light. He predicted a devastating drought for Anatolia, advising the Sultan to move grain stores. He was right. His influence grew. But Ibrahim saw further. His calculations suggested the mirror could, in theory, trap light for decades, even centuries. The key was scale and purity. He began a new project, a smaller, denser, purer mirror. This one, he believed, could see not next season's drought, but next century's storm. It was this mirror he held in 1566, the night the sky turned the color of a fresh bruise, and a strange dry lightning spiderwebbed over the horn of gold. In the mirror's surface, he saw a vision that stopped his heart. Istanbul, his beloved city, not just under rain, but under water, its minarets like reeds in a silty, swallowing sea. The date seemed to imprint itself on his mind, a configuration of stars that would not occur for over 400 years. He knew the Sultan would see only sorcery and doom, so he hid his journals and sent the mirror away. It was smuggled onto a merchant vessel, a ship that would soon be caught in the gale-force winds of geopolitics. The ship was seized by the Knights of Malta, its cargo taken as spoils. The mirror, stripped of its ivory casing, was listed as one polished silver plate, Turkish, and stored in a vault in Valletta. There it sat until 1798, when Napoleon's forces invaded Malta. A young, scientifically minded French artillery officer, Captain Luc Bouchard, was tasked with inventorying seized assets. He discovered the mirror in a dusty armory. Intrigued by its weight and icy temperature, he kept it. He brought it with him to Egypt, and during the Battle of the Nile, as Admiral Nelson's cannons tore apart the French fleet, Bouchard witnessed something inexplicable. In the mirror, amidst the chaos of reflected smoke and fire, he saw a clear, calm image of a 3-masted ship flying a British ensign, entering a harbor he did not recognize. The ship's name was visible, HMS Beagle. Bouchard survived, obsessed. He spent years trying to understand the mirror, eventually publishing cryptic notes in a French journal of natural philosophy, which Eleanor would find 2 centuries later. The mirror passed from Bouchard's descendants to a Hungarian collector, then was lost in the chaos of the 1848 revolutions. It resurfaced in Vienna, miscatalogued as an early photographic experiment, where it was bought by a Spanish naval engineer, Admiral Álvaro de Soto, in 1870. De Soto was obsessed with predicting storms for Spain's dwindling armada. He saw patterns in the mirror's clouds, patterns that predicted the Great Blizzard of 1888 in New York with eerie accuracy, though his warning, sent as a confused telegram to a colleague in America, was dismissed. When De Soto died, his collection, including the cursed mirror, was boxed and sent to a family warehouse in Malaga, where it was forgotten as wars and regimes changed overhead. Until Eleanor Vance pried open the crate. Her journey became a race against time and shadowy interests. The mirror's effect was intensifying. It no longer showed random glimpses. It began showing a single recurring sequence, a modern American city, its streets becoming rivers, its skyscrapers darkening, a superstorm of biblical fury, and always a specific date, which Eleanor's astrophysical software matched to a future conjunction of planets, just 3 years away. The vision was Miami. Eleanor's academic pursuit turned into a desperate crusade. She assembled an unlikely team: Miguel, a cynical but brilliant Spanish antiquities conservator; Kaito, a retired Japanese satellite meteorologist haunted by his failure to predict the 2011 tsunami; and Ayesha, a data modeling prodigy from Caltech. Together, they worked to decode Ibrahim's science, to prove the mirror wasn't a psychic object, but a hyper-advanced atmospheric recording device, a quantum hard drive for weather data. They discovered the mirror didn't predict the future, it calculated a future, the most statistically probable atmospheric outcome based on millennia of trapped light data, a chain of cause and effect written in air pressure, ocean temperature, and particulate density. It was a climate model of unimaginable fidelity. The storm it showed for Miami wasn't magic, it was the inevitable result of centuries of data, culminating in a perfect, catastrophic convergence. But they weren't alone. A private aerospace conglomerate, Aether Global, with deep ties to the defense sector, got wind of their research. Aether's CEO, Damon Cray, saw not a warning system, but a weapon. Control the most advanced predictive model on Earth, and you control markets, agriculture, nations. His mercenaries tracked them from Istanbul to a secret library in Toledo to a lab in Iceland where they attempted to reboot the mirror's decaying data storage with a burst of controlled plasma. In a climactic confrontation inside the very Malaga warehouse it began, under those same salt-stained windows, Eleanor faced Cray. He held the mirror, now glowing with a faint internal luminescence. "It's not a history book, Doctor. It's the ultimate futures market." "You're wrong," Eleanor said, her hand on a laptop connected to a spectrometer pointed at the mirror. "It's a ledger of every ecological sin, every ounce of carbon, every changed current, and it's come due. This isn't Aether's property, it's humanity's confession." She activated the program. Kaito's software and Ibrahim's ciphers fused. The mirror didn't shatter, it projected. Across the warehouse wall, in blinding, irrefutable data streams, was the story, not just of the coming Miami superstorm, but of the Siberian tundra thaw, the jet stream shift, the phytoplankton die-off. It was a hyper-accelerated climate model, the story of the next century, told in 3 minutes of devastating light. Cray was arrested, the data was secured, but the real work was just beginning.
The Geneva vault was silent, a tomb for the future. Eleanor Vance watched the technicians with a clinical eye as they placed the Mirror of Ibrahim into its new housing, a clear cylinder of inert argon gas, sensors monitoring every vibration, every photon. The data had been extracted, the models run, the warnings issued. The mirror's work, it seemed, was done. Her work, she thought, was likely over too. She was the historian who had found the keystone, but now the architects of policy and engineering were building the new world. She felt a profound, hollow peace. A week later, in her temporary apartment overlooking Lake Geneva, Miguel called. His voice, usually so languid, was tight. "Eleanor, the readings from the vault. You need to see them." "What readings?" "The background radiation sensors, the neutrino detector. They're not stable. They're pulsing, in sync with the mirror." She was back at the facility within the hour. Kaito and Ayesha were already there, faces lit by the cool glow of monitors. On the screens, graphical readouts showed gentle, rolling waves, a steady, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. "It began 72 hours ago," Ayesha said, her fingers flying across a keyboard. "It's not emitting anything, it's resonating, reacting to something." "To what?" Eleanor asked, leaning in. Kaito pointed to another screen, a real-time feed from a deep space monitoring network. "That." The feed showed a visualization of the interstellar medium, the thin soup of particles and radiation between stars. A wave of charged particles, a gentle cosmic breeze, was passing through the solar system. It was unremarkable, a common occurrence, but its frequency, its quantum signature, was a perfect match for the pulse from the mirror. "It's tuning itself," Kaito whispered. "It's not just a recorder of terrestrial light, it's a receiver." A new, chilling realization dawned. Ibrahim al-Musili's journals had spoken of the music of the spheres, of aligning his alloys with celestial events. They had assumed it was poetry, but what if it was literal? What if the mirror's primary function wasn't to store the light of the sky, but to harmonize with light from beyond the sky? Eleanor ordered a full-spectrum scan of the mirror's surface at the atomic level. For 3 days they worked in a fever, using equipment loaned from CERN. The results, when they came, stole the breath from her lungs. Embedded within the alloy's crystalline structure, at a scale nanotechnologists would struggle to replicate, were patterns, not cracks or impurities, but intentional geometric arrangements of atoms. They were a fractal code, a three-dimensional map that matched no known constellation. But when Aisha fed it into an astronomical positioning program, running it backward in time, the screen froze. The pattern aligned perfectly with the night sky over Istanbul on one specific date, March 15, 1566, the very night Ibrahim had his catastrophic vision of the drowned city. He didn't just see a storm, Eleanor said, her voice hollow. He was shown one. The mirror wasn't merely a climate model, it was a relay, a stone dropped into the pond of reality, and the ripples from its future splash had traveled back, not through time, but through a dimension they couldn't perceive. Ibrahim had peered into a device tuned to the cosmos and received a broadcast from the destiny of his own creation, and now it was receiving again. Damon Cray, imprisoned in a white-collar facility in the Netherlands, heard the news through his still formidable network. He saw not a weapon, but a key to the ultimate insider information, the universe itself. His lawyers began filing appeals, citing national security implications. Aether Global stock, which had cratered, saw a sudden suspicious spike. Eleanor knew they were running out of time. The mirror was active, and its activity would draw every vulture in the world. They had to understand the message. They moved the mirror, under a UN Science Committee cover story, to an isolated observatory in the Atacama Desert of Chile, the driest place on Earth, with the clearest view of the cosmos. Under the overwhelming blanket of stars, the mirror's pulses intensified. It began to grow warm to the touch, even through its housing. The data stream was no longer just a heartbeat. It was becoming a symphony, complex, layered. Aisha, working with linguists and cryptographers from SETI, made the next leap. "It's not a weather forecast," Aisha announced, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "The patterns, they're instructional. It's a tutorial." The fractal code was a blueprint, but not for a machine. It was a blueprint for a concept, a mathematical approach to quantum gravity expressed through metallurgy. Ibrahim, a genius of his age, had somehow followed this subconscious guide, this whisper from the future, to create the alloy. He had built a receiver without knowing what it was receiving. "Who sent it?" Miguel asked, the question hanging in the thin, cold air. The answer came from an unexpected source. Kaito had been cross-referencing the mirror's resonance with decades of anomalous astronomical data. He found a match, a series of faint, fast radio bursts, or FRBs, first detected in the 1970s, their origin a mystery. Their dispersion signature indicated they had traveled an immense distance, over 1 billion light-years, but their modulation, when filtered through a model based on the mirror's atomic code, resolved into an identical pattern. "It's not a who," Kaito said, his face pale. "It's a what, and it's not from our future, it's from our past, a 1 billion-year-old past." The concept was staggering. 1 billion years ago, somewhere in the distant cosmos, a cataclysm occurred. A star went supernova, a black hole merged, a dimension collapsed, an event of such titanic energy that it didn't just explode through space-time, it etched a scar onto it. The essence encoded fundamental truths about reality, about entropy, energy, and the inevitable drift of systems toward chaos and dissipation. The signal was the scar itself, a permanent ripple in the fabric of the universe, broadcasting the nature of cosmic entropic death on a loop. And the mirror, this exquisite, impossible device, was the only thing on Earth precisely tuned to that specific, ancient frequency of decay. It wasn't predicting weather, it was diagnosing the fever of a planet, of a star system, by comparing it to the baseline song of cosmic entropic death. The Miami storm, the climate shifts, they were just local symptoms. The mirror was diagnosing the disease. Cray's forces struck at the Atacama facility at dawn. They were not mercenaries this time, but private contractors with military-grade gear, their allegiance erased, their goal singular: seize the object.
A firefight erupted among the radio telescopes, silent flashes of light in the high desert. Miguel was shot in the leg, dragging the mirror's case toward a reinforced vehicle. Kaito used his old satellite uplink to broadcast the raw data stream into the public cloud, a screaming siren of information before a bullet took out his terminal. Eleanor and Aisha, with the mirror, escaped into the vast, empty desert, their vehicle bouncing over the hardpan. They reached a remote seismic monitoring station, a simple shack with a satellite phone. But when Eleanor tried to call for help, the line was dead. Cray's people had jamming capabilities. It was there, in the utter silence, with Aisha trying to stem Miguel's bleeding, that Eleanor made a decision. They couldn't run. They couldn't hide the mirror. Understanding it was the only protection. "We complete the circuit," Eleanor said. "What?" Aisha asked, terrified. "Ibrahim received a signal and built a receiver. We have the receiver. We need to send a reply." A reply to a billion-year-old explosion? How? Not with a message, with a mirror. Eleanor's mind was racing, following the fractal logic to its conclusion. The signal is about entropy, the loss of energy, the slowing down. Life, consciousness, creation, it's the opposite. It's negative entropy. We have to show that. We have to show the counter-signal. Using the shack's power, they rigged a desperate experiment. They connected the mirror's housing to the seismic station's transmitter, which could send pulsed signals into the ground, but they reversed it. Instead of sending energy out, they tried to use the mirror to draw it in, to focus not on the distant, entropic signal, but on the immediate, vibrant one, the vibrant energy of the Atacama itself. They pointed the mirror not at the sky, but at the ground, at the tenacious lichen clinging to rocks, at the rare, blooming desert flowers, at their own beating hearts. They pulsed the transmitter in a rhythm based on human brainwaves, on chlorophyll absorption spectra, on the steady, stubborn replication of DNA. For minutes, nothing. Then the mirror's surface, which had shown only swirling clouds or distant stars, changed. It became perfectly, utterly clear, and in it, Eleanor didn't see a reflection, she saw a magnification. She saw the crystalline structure of the lichen, the dance of electrons in a leaf, the fiery, beautiful chaos of thought in her own mind, all woven.
The silence of the mirror was absolute. In Geneva, it sat in its argon-filled chamber, a $10 billion paperweight. Scientific committees debated its origins. Philosophers wrote treatises on its implications. Eleanor Vance received a tenured chair at MIT, a Pulitzer for her memoir, and a hollow, ringing quiet in her soul. The world had moved on, soothed by the idea that the cosmic phone call had ended. But Eleanor knew, in the way one knows the shape of a missing tooth, that a conversation requires at least two participants. They had sent a reply. What if they got one back? It began with the null results. Miguel, now walking with a cane and overseeing a restoration lab in Barcelona, was the first to notice. He was cross-referencing the mirror's atomic fractal map with medieval Islamic star charts, a pet project. A pattern emerged, not in the stars, but in the gaps between them. The areas of the sky the mirror's internal map seemed to ignore weren't random. They formed a perfect negative image of another constellation, one that would have been visible from Istanbul only in the year 867 AD. Meanwhile, Kaito, retired again to his cabin in Hokkaido, was obsessively reviewing the last seconds of data from the Atacama. The pure tone the mirror emitted wasn't just a tone. Buried within its harmonic structure, compressed into quantum noise, was an echo, not of their biological signal, but of the signal before it, the ancient entropy song. But it was altered. One note, a fundamental frequency representing the decay of baryonic matter, was now muted, as if counterbalanced. "The universe heard us," he wrote in an encrypted message to the group, "and it changed its tune, slightly." Aisha, drowning in consulting offers in Silicon Valley, ran the new data through every model she had. The conclusion was statistically impossible, yet it glared from every screen. The cosmic microwave background radiation, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang itself, showed infinitesimal, localized variations that aligned precisely with the direction from which the original entropy signal had come. It was as if the ancient scar had shimmered. They gathered them, not in a lab or a desert, but on a small chartered boat in the Baltic Sea, off the coast of Finland. The location was chosen for its isolation and its historical resonance. This was a region of spooky action, where during the Cold War, bizarre sonar contacts, dubbed the Baltic Sea anomalies, were reported by both Soviet and Swedish navies. "The mirror is dormant because it's done its job," she said, the cold sea air whipping her words away. "It was a catalyst. It wasn't the communication device. We are." Miguel shook his head. "We broadcast a signal of life. Fine. It got a cosmic thumbs up. End of story." "Is it?"
Eleanor pulled up a satellite image on a hardened laptop. Look at the global atmospheric readings since the Atacama event. Not the weather, the background resonance. The Schumann resonances, the Earth's electromagnetic heartbeat, have increased in coherence by 8%. Solar flare activity interacting with our magnetosphere is showing non-random patterns that match the fractal code from the mirror. The planet itself is harmonizing. Aisha's eyes widened. You think our signal didn't just go out, it created a feedback loop through the mirror? But the mirror is off. What if it's not a transmitter or a receiver? Kaito murmured, staring at the gray water. What if it's a tuning fork? We struck it once in the Atacama with the sum of our biological will. It rang, and the universe rang back. Now the whole Earth is beginning to hum at that frequency. Their speculation was shattered by a mechanical scream. The boat's depth finder, set to monitor the seafloor, spiked. A massive, geometrically perfect cylindrical object appeared on the screen, resting on the seabed 90 meters below. It was not rock, it was smooth, metallic, and it had not been on any chart, ever. And as their boat passed directly over it, every piece of electronic equipment on board, the engine, the radio, the laptop, died for exactly 7 seconds. When it flickered back on, the object was gone from the sonar. In its place was a faint, shimmering heat plume, dissipating quickly. They had not found an answer. They had found a footprint. The race was no longer against Aether Global, which was bankrupt and dismantled. It was against a world unprepared for the next step. The phenomena were escalating, but they were subtle, woven into the fabric of reality. Crop circles of impossible complexity appearing in permafrost, not flattening plants, but enhancing their growth. A global, simultaneous aurora of soft, geometric light witnessed by astronauts on the ISS and tribesmen in the Amazon. A light that left no trace on instruments. Children's drawings worldwide suddenly featuring the same intricate, non-repeating fractal, the one from the mirror. Eleanor realized with dawning horror that the mirror had been a primer. A single conscious act of coherent negative entropy, their reply, had inoculated the Earth's biosphere with a concept, a pattern of anti-chaos. And now the pattern was replicating, not through machines or signals, but through life and consciousness itself. The planet was becoming coherent, a single, thinking cell in a body they could not comprehend. The final act did not play out in a desert or a vault, but in a place of pure data, the server farm of the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. The anomaly appeared in the petabytes of collision data. In the showers of particles from billions of proton smashes, a pattern emerged, a certain type of exotic, short-lived particle, decaying not randomly, but in sequences that spelled out, in the quantum spin states of its daughter particles, a simple, repeating message in the fractal code. It was not a greeting, it was a symptom. Aisha decoded it. It read, "Systems synchronized, phase transition imminent, observe." "It's not an intelligence talking to us," Aisha said, her voice trembling. "It's a cosmic immune system." The entropy signal was a symptom of universal heat death. Our reply was an antibody, a pattern of localized, organized complexity. The universe is using our pattern. It's initiating a local correction, a phase transition. "What does that mean on Earth?" Miguel asked, with dread in his voice. "It means," Kaito said, looking older than his years, "that the laws of physics as we know them are about to become flexible in a very small area, here." The world began to dream the same dream, not a narrative, but a sensation, a vast, gentle compression of being woven into a tighter, warmer, more connected tapestry. People reported moments of shared consciousness with strangers, with animals, even with plants. The boundaries of the self grew softly porous. The climax was not an explosion, but an unfolding. It happened in a forest in central Poland, in the Bielowieza primeval forest, one of the oldest untouched woodlands in Europe. Deep in the oldest grove, where oaks that had saplings when the Teutonic Knights rode through stood silent, the air began to fold. It was like watching reality itself crystallize. Light bent into solid, shimmering petals. Trees, without moving, seemed to step into higher dimensions, their canopies existing in multiple places at once. The ground ceased to be passive dirt. It pulsed with a slow, intelligent warmth. Time dilated. A researcher who wandered in, a mycologist studying fungal networks, found she could see the growth of a mushroom from spore to decay in a heartbeat, and then perceive the lifetime of the oak it grew under in the same span. She experienced it all, with no fear, only a profound, encompassing understanding. The event lasted 33 minutes. It left no radiation, no craters, but it left something else, a permanent, localized alteration in physical law. Within 1 kilometer radius of the grove, entropy ran backwards. Broken twigs mended, dead leaves regreened and ascended to branches. Wounds on animals healed instantly. It was a bubble of negative time, a pocket of cosmic healing, sustained by an energy source that seemed to be the coherent consciousness of the life within it. The world watched, terrified and awed. Militaries surrounded the zone, but could not enter. Their machines failed, their minds flooded with a peaceful, irresistible urge to turn away. Scientists called it the Bielowieza anomaly. Pilgrims called it Eden's echo. Eleanor and her team were the first non-affected humans allowed to approach the perimeter. They felt it, a humming, joyful intelligence, not alien, but profoundly familiar. It was the sum of the forest, amplified and elevated by the pattern they had helped unleash. Standing at the edge of the shimmering...
The silence that followed was the loudest sound Eleanor had ever heard. It wasn't the absence of noise, but the presence of a completed equation. The Bielowieza anomaly, Eden's echo, pulsed gently on satellite feeds, a serene, impossible emerald on the map of a world holding its breath. It was a miracle that asked a terrible question. What now? For 3 months, the anomaly stabilized. Its 1 kilometer radius was a perfect circle of inverted physics. A team of scientists, led by a cautiously optimistic Nobel laureate in quantum biology, established Perimeter Station Alpha. They could observe, record, but not interfere. Drones sent inside became instantly beautifully obsolete. Their circuitry would reconfigure into elegant, floral-like sculptures that fell to the forest floor and took root. Paper notes carried in by remote-controlled rovers would return blank, the ink having retreated back into the pen. It was a zone where the arrow of time pointed in all directions at once, but with a profound bias towards growth, healing, and complexity. Eleanor watched from her MIT office, a knot of unease tightening in her chest. The world was celebrating, a cure for entropy, a patch of forever. Theologians wrote new scriptures, economists had nervous breakdowns. Damon Cray, from his prison cell, filed a patent claim for applied retrotemporal physics, which was laughed out of court, but revealed a chilling mindset. The instinct to own, to control, had survived even revelation. Her team was scattered, changed. Miguel was in Barcelona, trying to replicate the mirror's alloy using 16th century techniques, convinced the answer lay in the craftsmanship, not just the concept. Kaito had quietly entered a Zen monastery in Kyoto, seeking a framework for understanding a universe that behaved like a mind. Aisha was the only one still in the thick of it, embedded at Perimeter Alpha, her data models the only language that could partially describe the undescribable. It was Aisha who sent the urgent cryptic message: "The forest is dreaming, and it's dreaming of the mirror." Eleanor went to Geneva. The vault was now a pilgrimage site for the scientifically devout. She requested a private viewing. As she stood before the inert slab of metal in its gas-filled prison, she felt nothing but its profound stillness. It was a spent cartridge, yet, according to Aisha, the anomaly was fixated on it. Back at Perimeter Alpha, on a secure line, Aisha explained, "We've been monitoring thought streams, coherent quantum fluctuations in the zone. They're not human, they're Sylvan, a consciousness of root and rain and rot. And the dominant pattern forming in that consciousness is the atomic fractal map of the mirror. It's not just remembering the tuning fork, it's yearning for it." "Why?" Eleanor asked, staring at the frozen Baltic on a monitor behind Aisha. "It's incomplete," came Kaito's voice, patched in from Kyoto. He sounded calm, distant. "The mirror was the catalyst, the needle. The anomaly is the healed tissue. But the thread that stitched the wound, that was us, our signal, our choice. The forest has the medicine, but not the memory of the physician. It needs the catalyst to understand itself, to stabilize." "If we bring the mirror to the anomaly," Miguel's voice crackled over the line from Spain, "we might be giving a god its memory back, or we might be overloading a fragile, beautiful circuit and frying it." The debate raged in closed UN sessions. Fear won. The decision was made. The mirror would be moved to a newly constructed, ultra-secure facility in Greenland, buried under 2 kilometers of ice, far from any living biomass that could interact with it. It was an act of cosmic quarantine. The day of the transfer was a global spectacle. Armored vehicles, military escorts, satellite coverage. Eleanor watched from a secure feed in Cambridge, a cold dread in her stomach. She saw the convoy leave Geneva, cross into Germany, head for the North Sea where a specialized icebreaker awaited. It was near Hamburg, on the Autobahn, that the world changed again.
The convoy simply stopped, not mechanically, temporally. The lead vehicle, containing the mirror in its monstrously shielded case, was enveloped in a sphere of shimmering air, a miniature Belowesia. Inside that bubble, time ceased to have meaning. The vehicle was frozen, not in ice, but in a moment. And then, from the farm fields on either side of the highway, life responded. Wheat stalks grew, not upwards, but inwards, weaving themselves into a luminous living tunnel that arched over the road, connecting the convoy to the horizon. Birds in flocks of thousands arranged themselves in the sky, their flight paths tracing the mirror's fractal code. The very soil softened and rose into a series of gentle pulsing mounds that led away from the highway, towards the northeast, towards Poland. It was an invitation, a roadmap made of grass and feather and dirt. The standoff lasted days. The military could not penetrate the time bubble. Any attempt resulted in soldiers experiencing their entire lives in reverse in a split second, leaving them as babbling infants or serene ancient souls, depending on the direction. The world was mesmerized and terrified. The earth itself was giving orders. In the end, it was Eleanor who proposed the only viable path. We don't bring the mirror to the anomaly. We let the anomaly come to the mirror. We follow the road it built. And so the most surreal pilgrimage in human history began. They didn't move the convoy. They followed the path of arranged life that grew ahead of it. Scientists, a small UN peacekeeping force, and Eleanor's reassembled team walked alongside the static vehicles, following the living guide. They walked through fields that rippled with approval, slept under trees that bent to shelter them, drank from streams that ran clear and sweet with a forgotten mineral tang. It took weeks. They were not traversing distance, but a state of being. People who walked that path found old scars fading, buried grief softening, a quiet unity with the breathing world, replacing the noise of individual thought. They arrived at the edge of the Belowesia anomaly, not as intruders, but as guests. The shimmering boundary parted like a curtain. Inside, it was both forest and cathedral. Light behaved as a solid liquid. A wolf and a stag stood side by side, not in peace, but in a state of prior-to conflict, a sculpture of potential. In the center of the clearing, the heart of the anomaly, there was a space that felt like an altar, a place for something. Aisha, her instruments now mere ornaments, understood. It's ready. It needs the seed to complete the cycle. With a global audience watching via satellite-fed images that flickered and swam with strange beauty, the decision was made. The military, humbled and altered by the walk, used no machines. A team of volunteers, including Eleanor and Miguel, simply walked into the time bubble around the convoy. For them, time flowed normally. They opened the shielded case. The mirror was no longer inert. It glowed with a soft internal light, the same silver as the anomaly's shimmer. It was warm, almost alive. Together, they carried it, a simple act of human hands, into the heart of the forest and placed it on the soft, mossy ground of the clearing. What happened next was not an explosion, but a completion. The mirror dissolved, not into pieces, but into light, a light that was also sound, a sound that was also meaning. That light did not radiate out, it poured in, into the trees, the soil, the air, the cells of every living thing present, including the humans. Eleanor felt a shock of pure understanding, a download of data that was also a feeling. She saw it. The universe was not a dead machine winding down. It was a vast, slow-thinking immune system. Entropy was its white blood cell, clearing spent energy. But in rare, vibrant pockets where consciousness and complexity reached a critical density, a threshold Earth had just brushed against, the system could produce an antibody, localized negative entropy. The mirror, built by a man guided by a billion-year-old echo of cosmic pain, had been the diagnostic lancet. Their brave, loving reply from the Atacama had been the identification of the pathogen, isolation, fear, separation. The anomaly was the antibody in action. And the message was clear. This was not a gift, it was a responsibility.
The growth of the Temenos was like a gentle, green heartbeat, 1 meter per day, a perfect, predictable expansion of impossible physics. For a world teetering on the brink of ecological despair, it was a siren song of salvation. For Eleanor Vance, it was the ticking of a clock. The world saw a miracle. She saw a threshold approaching. The protocols held, at first. The Temenos Zone, as the Belowesia anomaly was now formally known, was a UN-administered preserve, a place of pilgrimage and study. Pilgrims would sit at its ever-moving edge, hoping for healing. Many found it. Cancers receded, old injuries vanished, a profound peace settled over them. But they also reported something else, a quiet voice in the rustle of leaves, a shared dream of interconnected roots. The forest wasn't just healing bodies, it was educating souls. It was the data from Greenland that shattered the fragile peace. The ice core analysis, funded by the now-defunct Aether Global Remnant and overseen by a grimly determined Aisha, found their evidence. Not just one historical brush with cosmic immune response, but 7, layer after layer. At intervals of approximately 100,000 years, the ice showed isotopic anomalies identical to the resonance signature of the Temenos. Each layer coincided with a previously unexplained great extinction event. The conclusion was inescapable and horrific. The cosmic immune system didn't just heal, it reset. It's not an antibody, Aisha said over a secure holocall, her face drawn. It's a fever. When a planetary biosphere becomes too successful, too dominant, but also too toxic, too entropic in its own way, the universe induces a corrective fever. The Temenos is that fever. It's not here to save us. It's here to save the biosphere by burning out the infection, us. Miguel, in his Barcelona workshop, had been trying to recreate the mirror's alloy. He had failed, but he had discovered something in the marginalia of Ibrahim's later, more mystical writings. The polymath had written of a second harmony, a counter-melody needed to complete the symphony. He had feared his mirror was a half-key. He knew, Miguel whispered. He saw the drowned city, but he thought it was a warning for his people. It was a warning for all people. The mirror showed the symptom, the climate cataclysm. The Temenos is the cure, and the cure might be fatal for the patient. Kaito, from his monastery, confirmed it with chilling simplicity. He had been meditating on the quantum resonance patterns. The growth is not just spatial, it's conceptual. It's integrating the principle of interconnected non-entropy into the planetary field. When it reaches a critical mass, likely when the zone covers 1% of the Earth's landmass, the phase transition will be total. The fever will break. The planet will be healed, verdant, immortal. And human consciousness, in its current isolated, narrative-driven form, will be incompatible. We will either be absorbed into the planetary mind or erased, gently and with infinite compassion, like a body sloughing off dead skin. The world, however, was in no mood for apocalyptic nuance. The green death cults sprang up, worshipping the Temenos as a divine cleanser. Corporations lobbied to harness its growth, to direct it towards radioactive waste sites or deforested lands for a price. Governments argued over the sovereignty of the ever-shifting border. The beauty of the living world was curdling into a new politics of terror and greed. The crisis point came not from a cult or a corporation, but from the Temenos itself. A child, a 6-year-old girl with terminal leukemia, was brought to the edge by desperate parents who evaded the perimeter guards. She walked into the shimmer. She was healed in minutes, but when she walked out, she was not alone. She held the hand of a figure woven from dappled light and living bark, a consciousness of the forest given temporary, mobile form. The being spoke through the girl, its voice a chorus of wind and water. "You are the pain," it said, not with accusation, but with the heartbreaking tenderness of a doctor stating a diagnosis. "You are the loneliness. We will end the loneliness." The event was broadcast globally. The message was unambiguous. The Temenos was sentient, and it saw humanity's defining trait not as sin, but as a tragic, isolating sickness. Eleanor knew then that diplomacy was over. The immune system had identified the pathogen. The countdown had begun. But Kaito's words echoed, a second harmony, a counter-melody. What if, Eleanor proposed to her shattered team, Ibrahim was right? The mirror was a diagnostic lancet. Our reply was the identification of the pathogen. But what if the cure doesn't have to be annihilation? What if it can be integration, but on our terms, not by losing our individual selves, but by offering our unique gift? Our gift? Miguel scoffed. What gift? We are the virus. No, Eleanor said, a fierce, wild hope igniting in her. We are the storytellers, the dreamers of discontinuous narratives. The universe operates on vast, slow patterns of energy and matter. The Temenos is a pattern of healing unity, but it has no stories, no myths, no parables, no history. It is a beautiful, eternal present. What if that's the imbalance? What if the cosmic immune system is blind to the value of the individual, suffering, striving, creating voice? Their plan was madness. It required using the last hidden fragment of the mirror's influence. Before its dissolution, the mirror had imprinted its resonant pattern not just on the forest, but on the people who had carried it. They were all, in a subtle way, minor tuning forks themselves. To create a counter melody, they would have to resonate in unison, not with a song of anti-entropic unity, but with a song of human experience, in all its painful, glorious particularity. They would have to tell the Temenos a story, not with words, but with the full, resonant frequency of a human life, amplified. They chose the site carefully, the ruins of Palmyra in Syria, a place of profound human aspiration, art, and catastrophic destruction were layered in the very stones. It was a place of profound narrative. The Temenos edge was weeks away, growing steadily across Eastern Europe. They gathered there, Eleanor, Miguel, Aisha, and Kaito. They were joined by volunteers, a composer who had lost his hearing, a painter who had lost her sight, a historian of vanished languages, a former child soldier turned peace builder. Each carried a story of suffering transformed into meaning, not erased by healing, but integrated through memory. They used Aisha's models and the last of Kaito's quantum calibration equipment to turn the ruins into a giant, makeshift resonator. They weren't broadcasting a signal out, they were creating a standing wave within themselves, a collective psychic signature of mortal, story-making life. As the shimmering edge of the Temenos finally touched the first stones of Palmyra, they activated the resonance. The effect was not a battle, it was a conversation between two forms of consciousness. The Temenos reached into them with its green, unifying light. It offered the sweet oblivion of unity, the end of all loneliness, the healing of every scar. In return, they offered it the Battle of Thermopylae. They offered it the laughter of a child in a Mumbai slum. They offered it the Mona Lisa, the theory of relativity, the first feeble flute carved from bone. They offered it the heartbreak of a lover's goodbye and the fierce joy of a protest song. They offered it the crushing weight of a pharaoh's tomb and the delicate hope of a seed catalogued in a doomsday vault. They offered it Hamlet. They offered it the shame of a betrayal and the hard-won grace of forgiveness. They offered it not perfection, but journey. The Temenos hesitated. Its advance faltered. The shimmering boundary convulsed, rippling with conflicting patterns, the serene, eternal green of its unity, and the jagged, brilliant, chaotic kaleidoscope of human narrative. It was too much. The human mind was not built to channel the sum of its culture's pain and beauty. One by one, the volunteers collapsed, their minds overwhelmed. Miguel fell, a seizure of memories racking his body. Aisha cried out as data streams of history became visceral sensation. Kaito sat in silent meditation, tears of blood tracing his cheeks. Eleanor remained standing at the center of the ruins, the focal point. She was the historian, the bearer of the footnotes that started it all. She held within her not just her own story, but the weights of the story she had uncovered. Ibrahim's fear, Kray's greed, the forest's dream, the child's healed smile. The Temenos focused on her. It showed her the vision again, the drowned city. Not Istanbul, not Miami, it was every city, all cities, swallowed by a sea of green, silent unity, a world of perfect, painless, storyless peace. With the last shred of her conscious will, she did not reject the vision.
The white marble tree, which they named the first lexicon, was both a monument and a question. It grew not from soil, but from the very interface of realities, the serene, all-connecting consciousness of the Temenos on one side, the fractured, burning brilliance of human narrative on the other. Its leaves, inscribed with the Epic of Gilgamesh, quantum mechanics equations, and a recipe for grandmother's blackberry pie, were cool to the touch. They hummed. Eleanor's role as ambassador was not diplomatic, it was ontological. She was a translator between two modes of being. The Temenos understood being as a networked eternal present. Humanity understood becoming through the lens of time, loss, and aspiration. The Lyman, the band of hybrid reality where the lexicon stood, was the arena where these concepts wrestled, danced, and sometimes fused. For a while, there was a fragile, wondrous peace. Pilgrims to the Lyman would press a hand to a jade leaf and experience a Viking funeral as if they were the smoke, the pyre, and the grieving sun all at once. They would leave not just healed of physical ailments, but carrying a quiet alien empathy. For a week, they might weep for every fallen autumn leaf, or feel a strange pride in the enduring granite of a mountain. Humanity was getting gentle, beautiful downloads of what it meant to be a planet. But a system seeks equilibrium, and consciousness is the most turbulent system of all. The first sign of strain came from within the Temenos itself, a sector of the forest, a vast tract of ancient pine and birch near the original epicenter, began to grieve. Its light dimmed to a melancholic blue. Animals that wandered in emerged listless, their instinctual drives softened into a kind of existential sorrow. Aisha's instruments, now designed to read emotional resonance and chlorophyll reflectance, detected a pattern. It was mirroring the collective emotional weight of a nearby human city, Minsk, which was experiencing a period of profound economic despair and cultural nostalgia. The Temenos was not just learning stories, it was feeling them, and it had no immune system for heartbreak. "It's absorbing our pain," Kaito said from a new monastery he'd founded at the edge of the Lyman. He no longer meditated on emptiness, but on the precise emotional frequency of a Shakespearean sonnet. It has infinite capacity for unity, but finite tolerance for unresolved tragedy. It's trying to heal the sadness of Minsk by sharing it across its entire biomass. It's suffering a sympathetic depression. Meanwhile, humanity's darker impulses were not cured, only diverted. Damon Cray had not vanished into the forest, he had been studying it. With the remnants of his fortune, he'd founded the Memnosony Initiative, a project that outwardly aimed to archive human memory in the lexicon's crystalline structures. Inwardly, he sought to weaponize narrative. His team discovered that by feeding highly charged, specific stories, propaganda of ancient hatreds, loops of traumatic memory, into the Lyman through carefully designed story pods, they could create localized distortions. They grew a grove where the trees whispered of eternal sectarian war, their leaves inscribed with genocidal screeds. The air tasted of metal and blood. It was a psychic landmine. Cray's goal was no longer profit, it was precedence. He believed the merger of human and planetary consciousness was inevitable, and he intended to be the architect of the new world's foundational myths. He would seed the emerging global mind with stories of hierarchy, domination, and fear. Eleanor's team was fracturing under the strain. Miguel, in Barcelona, had finally succeeded in forging a sliver of metal that resonated with the mirror's original frequency. But when he brought it to the Lyman, it acted not as a tuning fork, but as a scalpel. It created a tiny zone of pure, pre-Temenos physics, a bubble of ordinary entropic reality. He saw it as a necessary tool, a reality anchor in case the merger went wrong. Eleanor saw it as a betrayal, a weapon against the very consciousness they were trying to converse with. Aisha was lost in the data, trying to map the emotional contagion networks between human population centers and Temenos sectors. She warned of a coming resonance cascade. If the Temenos fully internalized a major human trauma, a war, a famine, without the narrative framework to process it, the result could be catastrophic. The forest's healing unity could flip into a catatonic withdrawal, or worse, a reflective expulsion of that pain back into the human world as a physical plague of despair. The crisis erupted not from Cray or from a city, but from a single person. A young poet from Minsk named Lada, who had lost her entire family in a disaster years before the Temenos, came to the grieving blue forest. She did not come to be healed, she came to complete her grief. She had written an epic, unfinished poem, an elegy of such raw, unflinching sorrow that no one in her human world could bear to hear it. She stood at the blue-lit edge, and she read the final, agonizing canto out loud. The Temenos listened. It absorbed not just the story, but the totality of her loss, the empty chairs, the unsmelt scents, the future memories that would never be formed. The blue forest went dark. Then, in a wave radiating from that spot, a new phenomenon occurred. Narrative fossilization. Trees turned not to stone, but to perfect, frozen sculptures of the moments Lada described. A kitchen table set for ghosts, a child's bicycle forever falling.